A map can be the most deceptive object in the world. We see them as simple guides for getting from one point to another, but for most of human history, a map was something else entirely. It was a philosophical statement, a moral compass, and a sacred text all rolled into one. These were not directions, they were lessons. They formed what can only be called an atlas of memory, vast repositories of a culture's deepest wisdom, its founding myths, and its very identity. This journey will reveal how these ancient charts guided the soul, not just the body, and why learning to read their hidden language is more vital now than ever. You will discover how to see the stories, beliefs, and power struggles embedded in every line, transforming your understanding of both the past and the maps you use today. We will uncover why monsters lurked at the edges of the known world, and what a city placed at the center of a disk really meant. What is the one profound lesson you hope a map of your own life would teach? That small clay tablet from ancient Babylon presents a world startlingly different from our own. It shows Earth as a flat disk, floating in a vast and bitter river, with the city of Babylon itself sitting proudly at the very center. This was not a tool for a merchant to plot a course or a soldier to plan a march. It was a complete cosmological statement, a declaration of how the universe itself was structured. These primordial maps were the bedrock of a culture's identity, weaving together mythology, religion, and the observed patterns of the stars into a single, coherent whole. They were foundational texts, explaining everything from the moment of creation to humanity's precise and purposeful role within the divine order. As the historian Jerry Broughton reminds us, all maps are a synthesis of information, belief, and aspiration. You can see this synthesis in the core components of these cosmic charts. The bitter river surrounding the Babylonian disk is the cosmic ocean, the chaotic waters of nothingness from which order was born. Then there is the Axis Mundi, the world center, often symbolized by a mountain, a great tree, or in this case, a city, serving as the pivotal connection point between heaven, earth, and the underworld. This tradition of centering what matters most continued for millennia. Many medieval European maps, known as TO maps, placed Jerusalem at the very heart of the world, a direct reflection of a theological world, where spiritual significance dictated geography. The primary purpose of such a map was not to guide your body across land, but to guide your soul toward understanding. It imparted a profound lesson about divine order, making anyone who studied it a student of the cosmos. So we must pause and ask ourselves a vital question. What foundational beliefs about reality, about order, and about our own place in the world are silently embedded in the digital maps we use without a second thought today? This cosmic framework, however, was not just about stability and center. It also had to account for the unknown, the terrifying, and the edges of the world, where the map's lessons took on a much darker and more cautionary tone. These sprawling medieval world maps were far more than simple geography. They were dense tapestries woven with scripture and myth, where a traveler could encounter the Tower of Babel, the Golden Fleece, and a one-legged cyapod shading himself with his giant foot, all on the same parchment. This was the Mappa Mundi, a mirror of the world designed to reflect spiritual truths, not physical realities. Its primary function was to act as a moral compass, guiding the viewer through a landscape of virtue and sin toward salvation. Think of it as a visual sermon where every city, creature, and biblical scene served a profound didactic purpose. The very shape of the map reinforced this. Often oriented with east at the top, where the sun rises and where paradise was believed to lie, it positioned the Garden of Eden not as a lost location but as a spiritual destination. From this sacred center flowed the four rivers of paradise, branching out to water the world and symbolizing the divine grace flowing from a single source. The monstrous races dwelling at the map's fringes, like the dog-headed cynocephali or those cyopods, were not intended as zoological fact. They were powerful allegories. They represented the chaos of the unredeemed world, the spiritual strangeness that existed far from the light of the church, serving as stark warnings against a life lived without faith. This worldview was deeply influenced by thinkers like St. Augustine, who drew a sharp distinction between the earthly city, mired in sin, and the eternal city of God. A map like the magnificent Hereford Mappa Mundi is perhaps the ultimate expression of this idea. It is less a chart for navigation and more a grand encyclopedia of Christian belief, placing the story of Christ's crucifixion at its very heart, making the entire world a stage for divine history. Every pilgrim, every king, every scholar who studied its intricate details was receiving a lesson on the path to a righteous life. So we must wonder, as we navigate with flawless digital precision, what has become of the moral and ethical landscapes that our ancestors saw so clearly inscribed upon their world. If our maps no longer contain these allegorical beasts and sacred landmarks, have we lost a language for understanding our own place in a moral universe? This symbolic power, however, was never just about personal salvation. The very act of centering one holy city over another, of drawing certain peoples as civilized and others as monstrous, was a profound declaration of identity and control. That Portuguese chart, so precise and technical, marks a profound shift in the purpose of a map. Its intricate web of room lines was not drawn for spiritual guidance but for commercial and military dominance. This was cartography as an instrument of imperial power, a tool to project a nation's ambition across the globe. The mapmaker's pen was now a weapon, and every coastline claimed was a declaration of sovereignty. The scholar J.B. Harley famously argued that maps are never neutral, objective documents. They are always texts laden with intention and what he called hidden agendas, serving the interests of the powers that commission them. A map from this era did not merely describe territory, it actively constructed a reality that justified expansion and control. One of the most powerful techniques was the use of empty space. Those alluring blanks on the map, the areas marked as unknown or simply left white, were not admissions of ignorance. They were deliberate invitations, cartographic calls to action for explorers, merchants, and colonists to fill those voids with their own flags and place names. This practice reached its ultimate expression in the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, where Pope Alexander VI literally drew a line down a map of the Atlantic Ocean, granting everything to the west to Spain and everything to the east to Portugal. The entire non-European world was carved up on parchment before most of it had even been seen by European eyes. This was power projected through pure abstraction. Mapmakers reinforced this authority through a deliberate visual language. They adorned coastlines with the elaborate coats of arms of their monarchs. They named newly encountered lands after saints, kings, and queens, erasing indigenous toponyms and imposing a new, foreign identity upon the landscape. The scale of maps was often distorted, enlarging the homeland to appear more significant while shrinking rival territories. A detailed case study of British maps of India reveals this with chilling clarity. As the East India Company expanded its control, its surveyors produced incredibly detailed maps. These were not just for navigation, they were tools of administration, dividing the land into districts for taxation, and for control, charting roads for the swift movement of troops. The map became the nervous system of the empire, allowing a distant government in London to visualize, manage, and ultimately possess a subcontinent. This forces a crucial and unsettling question for our own time. If historical maps were instruments of royal and imperial power, what unseen forces shape the digital maps we use today? When a corporation, not a king, defines our borders and names our places, what new kind of authority are we unconsciously accepting? This recognition of the map as a tool of authority, however, is only half the story. For every map that was used to impose a grand narrative of empire, there were countless others being drawn to preserve a much more intimate and vulnerable form of knowledge, the atlas of personal and collective memory. A Renaissance scholar did not need a search bar to navigate the vast seas of human knowledge. He walked through a palace in his mind. This was the art of the memory palace, a mnemonic technique where a mental map, often of a real city or a grand building, became a cognitive framework for storing entire libraries of information. The anonymous author of the ancient text Rhetorica ad Hirnium and the great orator Cicero both detailed this method, teaching that to remember abstract concepts, you must first transform them into vivid, tangible images. You then place these images in specific locations or loci within a space you know intimately. The sequence of the locations provides the order for your thoughts, allowing you to retrieve complex philosophical arguments or lengthy historical chronologies simply by taking a mental stroll. The key was the emotional and visual power of the imagery. To remember a concept like justice, you would not simply picture the word. You might envision a majestic, stern-faced goddess holding a scale, and you would place her dramatically at the entrance of your mental amphitheater. The more striking and unusual the image, the more firmly it would stick in your memory, anchored to its specific spot on your internal map. This was not passive recollection, it was an active performance of the mind within a personally constructed world. The ultimate expression of this idea was Giulio Camillo's fantastical theater of memory, an actual wooden structure he built in the 16th century. It was a physical map of the cosmos, with tiers and seats corresponding to different fundamental ideas and elements of reality. A scholar standing at its center was meant to be able to access the entirety of human knowledge, organized spatially around him. This was an externalized memory palace, a tangible atlas of universal wisdom. This practice reveals a profound connection between mapping and memory that we have largely severed. Our digital tools store everything for us, from simple phone numbers to vast encyclopedias. But in outsourcing our memory to these external devices, have we allowed our own innate capacity for rich, spatial recall to atrophy? The map is no longer a scaffold we build inside our own minds, it is a screen we consult. This suggests that ancient maps were not just preserving geographical or spiritual knowledge, they were also training a fundamental human faculty. They were exercises in how to remember, teaching people to weave stories and information directly into the fabric of their own mental landscapes, ensuring that the most vital lessons of their culture would never be forgotten. A coffee stain on a 16th century portolan chart might mark the very spot where a tired navigator, hunched over his desk in the dim candlelight, decided to risk everything on a new course. These were not the clean, authoritative documents of Imperial cartography, but something far more human, maps as personal diaries of discovery. Each annotation, each sketch of a strange animal in the margin, each hastily drawn line representing a safe anchorage, was a testament to a lived experience, a moment of fear, wonder, or desperate hope. The map became a narrative, a story written in coastline and commentary. This is the third great lesson of the Atlas of Memory, that the most revealing maps are often the most personal, charting the inner journey of the cartographer as much as the outer world. Consider the meticulous journals and maps of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their famous expedition across North America was documented in a series of maps that are utterly inseparable from their written accounts. A notation of good hunting grounds speaks to their immediate need for survival. A carefully drawn symbol for a friendly native village reveals a crucial diplomatic alliance. The maps are a running log of their epic story, filled with observations on weather, soil quality, and the majestic, terrifying scale of the unknown continent. They did not just draw the Missouri River, they documented the struggle to navigate it, the names they gave to landmarks reflecting their hopes and their hardships. This narrative quality is most vividly seen in the marginalia, those notes and drawings that exist outside the strict boundaries of the chart. "Here be dragons" was never actually a common phrase on medieval maps, but the sentiment was everywhere. Illustrations of sea serpents coiling in uncharted waters or strange, humanoid figures in continental interiors were not claims of fact. They were powerful symbols of the cartographer's own fear and fascination with the terra incognita. They were placeholders for the question, what lies here? The answer was not yet a geographical feature, but an emotion, a story waiting to be written. The choice of what to include or omit was itself a form of storytelling. A mapmaker might carefully mark a sheltered bay with fresh water, a clear invitation for future travelers. That same mapmaker might deliberately omit a nearby reef that had claimed his own ship, a silent warning born of trauma, or perhaps a strategic decision to steer rivals toward danger. Every inclusion, every erasure was a deliberate act of shaping the narrative for those who would follow. Samuel de Champlain's incredibly detailed maps of New France offer a brilliant case study. His charts are not just geographical records, they are diplomatic documents. He meticulously recorded the locations of various Native American villages, often noting their alliances and the nature of his interactions with them. A symbol for a palisaded settlement was not just a dot on a map, it was a chapter in the story of French colonial ambition, a record of a fragile peace or a tense standoff. The map was his report, his argument for further support, and the story of his life's work. This forces a deeply personal reflection for us today. We no longer draw our journeys on parchment, but we create them constantly with every digital step we take. Our phones track our routes, tag our photos, and log our locations. This digital footprint is a modern narrative map, a story of our lives written in data points. It charts our daily routines, our vacations, our social connections. But who is the author of this story, and who is its intended audience? Are we, like Champlain, consciously crafting a narrative, or are we unconsciously generating a biography for algorithms to interpret? Understanding that every map tells a story, from the grand epic of an empire to the intimate diary of an explorer, finally allows us to see the most profound layer of the atlas of memory. These maps did more than guide individuals or project power. They actively wove the disparate threads of experience into the fabric of a shared cultural identity, a collective story that an entire people could call their own. A mountain is not simply a landform, it is an ancestor who stood firm against a great flood. A river is not just flowing water, it is the winding path of a creator serpent. This is the fourth and perhaps most profound lesson of the Atlas of Memory, where the map becomes the living embodiment of a culture's identity, its myths, and its very soul. In these traditions, geography and genealogy are one and the same. To know the land is to know your family history, your laws, and your place in the cosmos. The anthropologist Keith Basso captured this perfectly in his work with the Western Apache, noting that wisdom itself sits in places. Every canyon, every spring, every oddly shaped rock is a repository of a story, a moral lesson, or a historical event. The landscape is a continuous script, and to walk through it is to read from a sacred text. Nowhere is this more vividly illustrated than in the Aboriginal Australian concept of the songline. A songline is a map sung into existence. It charts the routes traveled by ancestral beings during the dream time, the epoch of creation. Each feature they created or encountered, a waterhole, a mountain range, a stand of trees, is memorialized in a specific verse of a song. To navigate the vast, featureless outback, a traveler does not consult a paper chart. They sing the song of the land. The very act of singing the correct sequence of verses while walking re-enacts the creation story, maintaining the world itself through ritual. The land and the song are inseparable. One cannot be understood without the other. This deep, narrative connection to place is a global phenomenon. The Norse envisioned their entire cosmos as a map called Yggdrasil, a great world tree whose roots and branches connected the 9 realms from the home of the gods to the land of the dead. It was a cosmological map that explained the structure of reality and humanity's precarious place within it. Across the Pacific, Micronesian navigators crafted intricate stick charts. These seemingly abstract lattices of twigs and shells were not literal pictures of islands. They were memory aids that encoded complex patterns of ocean swells, the paths of stars, and the flight of birds, a body of knowledge passed down through generations, making the treacherous sea a familiar, storied pathway. For the Maori of New Zealand, identity is mapped onto the land through Whakapapa. This is a genealogical framework that connects every person directly back to the ancestral beings and the geographical features they embody. A person introduces themselves by naming their mountain, their river, and their ancestral canoe. Your very identity is defined by your place within this living cartography of lineage and land. This forces a deeply unsettling question for our modern world. When we reduce a landscape to mere coordinates, to topographical lines and resource deposits, what profound stories are we erasing? What entire worlds of meaning, what libraries of ancestral wisdom are flattened into silence by our insistence on a purely physical map? This cultural atlas reminds us that a place is never just a location. It is a memory, a story, a law, and a relative. And this rich, layered understanding of the world was precisely what the next great revolution in cartography would seek to dismantle, replacing a world alive with story with one defined by measurement alone. Gerardus Mercator unrolled his New World Map in 1569, and with it he quietly dismantled an entire way of seeing. His famous projection was not created to teach a moral lesson or illustrate a divine plan. It was a tool, an instrument of pure navigation. A sailor could now draw a straight line across its grid and trust it would be a true course, a room line cutting across the curving globe. This was the moment the map began its profound transformation from a symbolic lesson into a scientific instrument. Mercator himself explained his goal was to spread on a plane the surface of the sphere in such a way that the positions of places shall correspond on all sides with their true directions and distances. The key word there is true. Truth was no longer defined by scripture or myth, but by mathematical consistency and empirical measurement. This shift was driven by the rising tide of the scientific revolution, a new belief that the universe operated on rational, mechanical principles that could be measured, mastered, and controlled. The map was no longer a mirror to the soul, it was a key to unlocking the mechanics of the planet. This philosophical earthquake was made possible by crucial technological advances. The magnetic compass gave sailors a reliable sense of direction. The printing press allowed for the mass reproduction of identical charts, standardizing knowledge across continents. But most importantly was a new faith in a mathematically ordered cosmos. Thinkers like Galileo declared that the great book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. Maps were now expected to be pages from that book. The consequences for the look of the map were radical. The decorative dragons and kings that once populated the edges vanished. The intricate biblical scenes at the center were erased. In their place came a clean, blank space, meticulously gridded with lines of longitude and latitude. Standardized symbols for cities, mountains, and forests replaced unique, story-filled illustrations. The goal was a neutral representation of space, a blank slate upon which objective data could be recorded. This new scientific ideal found its ultimate expression a century later in the work of the Cassini family. For 4 generations, they undertook a monumental project, the first ever precise topographic survey of the entire nation of France. Using the most advanced triangulation techniques, they did not paint a picture of a spiritual kingdom. They created a mathematically accurate scale model of its physical territory. It was a map for administrators, for tax collectors, for generals, a tool of the modern state that saw the land not as a story, but as a resource. This evolution gave humanity an unprecedented power to navigate and control the physical world. But it invites a deeply reflective question for us today. In our relentless pursuit of perfect accuracy and utility, what entire dimensions of meaning did we willingly leave behind? When we erased the monsters and the myths, when we flattened the world into a uniform grid, did we also lose our ability to see the stories, the memories, and the soul of the places we map? The London Underground map is a masterpiece of clarity, but it bears almost no resemblance to the city above. The twisting River Thames is straightened into a simplified gully. The actual, chaotic distances between stations are warped to create uniform spacing. This is the ultimate expression of the abstracting gaze, a process that systematically stripped the map of its stories to prioritize pure function. The cartographer Harry Beck understood that a rider does not need to know the city's topography, only the sequence of stops and connections. His genius was to sacrifice geographical truth for topological clarity, creating a diagram that is incredibly easy to use but tells us nothing of the life above. The history buried beneath a station's name, the neighborhoods it connects, or the stories of the people who flow through it. This is the 5th great lesson of our journey: how modern cartography erased the storyteller. The drive for standardization and objective accuracy transformed the map from a rich tapestry of meaning into a sterile set of quantifiable data points. The scholar Denis Wood powerfully reminds us that maps make the past and future present, but modern maps often present a very narrow version of that present, one defined by measurement alone. This abstraction was achieved through a series of deliberate erasures. The first was the removal of the cartouch, those elaborate illustrated frames that once held the map's title. A Baroque cartouch might feature sea gods, cherubs, and lush vegetation, immediately signaling the map's artistic and cultural ambitions. Its replacement was a simple, standardized typeface, a visual declaration that the map was now a technical document, not a work of art or philosophy. Next came the standardization of color. The rich, varied hues of a medieval mappa mundi, each carrying symbolic weight, gave way to a limited, functional palette. Blue for water, green for forest, white for unexplored territory. These colors no longer evoked emotion or allegory, they were mere labels. The empty spaces on the map underwent the most profound change. The unknown regions that were once populated with cautionary sea monsters and fantastical races were now simply blank. The white of Antarctica or the uniform blue of the ocean became data voids, representing not mystery but a simple lack of information. The monsters were gone, but so was the human curiosity and fear that placed them there. This narrowing of purpose reached its logical conclusion with the development of the thematic map. A map showing only population density or annual rainfall does one thing exceptionally well, but it does only that one thing. It silences every other possible story about that place, its cultural history, its economic struggles, its spiritual significance. It reduces a complex, multidimensional world to a single, measurable variable. So we are left with a crucial and unsettling reflection. Our modern maps are marvels of efficiency, allowing us to navigate global shipping routes or find the nearest coffee shop with breathtaking precision. But in this trade, have we become poorer readers of the world's deeper stories? Does the sterile clarity of the line chart or the GPS readout blind us to the layers of memory, meaning, and power that are still embedded in every landscape? Recognizing this great erasure is not a call to abandon accurate maps, but to see them for what they are, and more importantly, for what they are not. It is the essential first step toward reclaiming the lost art of reading any map, not just as a direction, but as a profound and lasting lesson. A lion was never just a lion. On a 16th century map, its powerful form, often crowned and holding a scepter, was a direct statement of a kingdom's strength and sovereignty. An art historian and a cartographer, hunched over such a document, are not just looking at geography. They are translating a lost language, a dense vocabulary of symbols where every creature, every color, and every decorative frame was a deliberate choice, laden with layers of meaning. To understand these maps, we must learn to read their symbols as our ancestors did, seeing them as complex texts that speak of power, faith, and the natural world. Scholars like Chet Van Duzer, who specializes in the history of cartography, remind us that even the most fantastical sea monsters were not random doodles. They were carefully considered symbols, often drawn from popular travelogues and classical texts, meant to convey specific information about the perils and wonders of uncharted territories. We can break this symbolic language down into a few key categories. Heraldic symbols were the language of political power. Eagles represented empires, crowns signaled royal domains, and coats of arms stamped a territory with the explicit mark of its ruler. Religious symbols mapped the spiritual landscape. A cross could mark a bishopric or a site of pilgrimage, while a lamb might symbolize a region of devout Christian faith, weaving theology directly into the topography. Then there were the natural symbols which personified the forces of the world. Winds were often depicted as the heads of cherubs, each puffing its breath from a different corner of the map, giving a face to the invisible currents that guided ships. A camel sketched in a region indicated a desert, a practical piece of geographical information communicated through a recognizable image. Even economic realities were encoded. A small vignette of a sugar mill or a spice plant was not merely decorative. It was a clear sign of colonial production, pointing to the brutal systems of labor and trade that made such commodities valuable to European powers. A perfect case study for this symbolic decoding is the Carta Marina, a magnificent map of the seas from the 1530s. Its waters teem with an astonishing bestiary of creatures. A massive sea serpent coils around a ship, representing the very real danger of storms and shipwrecks. A grotesque monster with a bearded, human-like face might symbolize the terrifying mystery of the deep, a place where the normal rules of nature did not seem to apply. Each beast was a placeholder for human knowledge, fear, and fascination. This practice forces a fascinating reflection for our own time. If we were to pause and truly read the symbols on a modern digital map, what would they tell us? The universally recognized icons for fast food, the glowing stars for highly rated businesses, the red and yellow lines that symbolize the flow of traffic and commerce. These are the heraldry of our age, speaking volumes about our societal values, our consumer habits, and our obsession with efficiency and convenience. Learning this lost language of cartographic symbolism does more than just unlock the past. It empowers us to become more critical and conscious readers of all maps, past and present. It reminds us that no representation of the world is ever truly neutral. It is always a story waiting for someone who knows the language to read it. A faded parchment from the 12th century shows a river flowing from deep in Africa, feeding the Nile, but its course is pure legend, a story repeated from Ptolemy. For an archaeologist, this is not a frustrating error. It is a vital clue. This is the sixth great lesson of the Atlas of Memory, that a map is a powerful historical artifact, a primary source that can reconstruct lost worlds not by its accuracy, but by its very distortions. The historian J.H. Andrews reminds us that the truth in maps is always relative to their purpose. A map does not show the world as it is, but as the map maker and the culture they represented believed it to be or needed it to be. An anomaly, like a city drawn 10 times its actual size, is not a mistake to be corrected. It is a flashing signal pointing to a place of immense political, economic, or religious significance. The Romans left behind a stunning example of this, the Tabula Peutingeriana. It is a road map of the empire, but it looks nothing like the land itself. Italy is a long, thin boot stretched horizontally, and distances are wildly distorted. Yet for an archaeologist, these distortions are the key. The map emphasizes what Rome valued most: connectivity and military supply lines. A small dot indicating a mansio, a roadside inn, might lead modern researchers to the foundation stones of a forgotten settlement, a place lost to history until the map's priorities revealed its likely location. The map's omissions are equally telling. A major mountain range might be minimized because it was an obstacle to be passed through, not a feature to be celebrated. Its silence speaks volumes about Roman engineering and their relentless focus on overland routes. Place names themselves are a historical archive written in cartographic ink. Tracing the evolution of a name on successive maps can reveal waves of conquest, cultural assimilation, and shifting power. A Celtic river name replaced by a Latin one, then a Germanic one, charts the entire history of a region without a single history book. We can see this methodology brilliantly applied to the work of the 12th century Islamic geographer Al-Idrisi. His world map, created for the Norman King Roger II of Sicily, is a synthesis of Greek, Islamic, and emerging European knowledge. It shows a world that is both vast and interconnected. For a historian, this map is not a picture of the Earth. It is a snapshot of the vibrant intellectual exchange happening in the Mediterranean, a testament to the flow of trade and ideas along silk and spice routes. The precise detail of the African coastline reveals the extent of Arab trading networks, while the inclusion of certain European rivers shows the information coming from Norman travelers. Every line is a dialogue between cultures, so we must pause and ask a deeply provocative question. What will future historians deduce about our own era from the digital maps we are creating today? When they analyze our satellite imagery, what will our relentless focus on optimizing traffic flow and marking consumer locations say about our deepest priorities? Our maps will tell them less about our landscapes and more about our minds, revealing a culture obsessed with efficiency, convenience, and the constant navigation of a commercial world. This ability to read a map as a cultural artifact, to see its errors as evidence and its emphases as declarations of value, completes our journey through the Atlas of Memory. It transforms every old map from a simple, flawed picture into a rich and complex testimony. That glowing smartphone screen showing a live traffic map is the new Mappa Mundi. Its red and yellow lines are not placed by a monk illustrating divine grace, but by an algorithm optimizing for speed, embedding a new set of invisible lessons for our time. We are still students of our maps, but the curriculum has changed. Where a medieval chart taught theology, a digital map teaches us to trust a black box algorithm without question. Where an imperial map showcased political dominion, a social media map visualizes our own network of influence and social capital. The tech ethicist Kate Crawford argues that artificial intelligence systems are political. They are shaped by power, and they shape power in return. Our maps are no exception. They are teaching us profound, often unconscious lessons about consumer behavior, corporate control, and the very nature of community. The recommendation engine is the new cartographer, subtly steering economic activity. When your map highlights certain restaurants or shops with prominent icons and high ratings, it is not a neutral act. It is a powerful form of wayfinding that directs human traffic and capital, creating winners and losers in the urban landscape based on data we cannot see. This digital guidance can even reinforce deep socio-economic divides. Think of a food desert, an area with limited access to affordable, nutritious food. A traditional paper map might simply show the streets, but a modern digital map driven by commercial incentives is unlikely to highlight the absence of a grocery store. It is a lesson in invisibility, teaching us that some communities and their needs are not worth mapping for profit. The most direct economic lesson happens in real time on ride-sharing apps. The surge pricing map, with its glowing red zones and multiplying fare estimates, is a live tutorial in supply and demand. It teaches passengers that their location and desperation have a precise monetary value, and it teaches drivers where the system dictates they should go to maximize earnings. This is a cartography of pure commerce, a lesson learned with every trip. Our every click and query becomes a data point, a new form of territory that is surveyed, claimed, and monetized. The personal atlas you generate by simply living your life, your routes, your frequent stops, your search history, is no longer your own private diary. It is a commodity sold to advertisers and used to refine the very systems that then guide your future choices. This forces a question that echoes through the entire history of cartography. What unconscious lessons are we absorbing from these interfaces? Are we learning that efficiency is the highest virtue, that our trust should be freely given to systems we cannot interrogate? That our social and economic value can be quantified by an app? The atlas of memory has not vanished. It has simply taken a new, deeply technological form, and we are all contributing to its writing with every search for a shortcut home. Your phone's navigation app charts the fastest route to a coffee shop, but it cannot map the path of your own life. This is the seventh and final lesson of the Atlas of Memory, a call to reclaim the map for ourselves, not as a tool for external navigation, but as a profound instrument for self-reflection and growth. Imagine drawing a map of your own mind, where the terrain is made of memory and the landmarks are your most pivotal experiences. This personal cartography uses the ancient language of spatial representation to visualize your inner world, transforming abstract thoughts and feelings into a landscape you can explore and understand. The principles are simple, yet the process is deeply revealing. You begin by establishing your cardinal directions, the core values that provide your true north and south, the fundamental beliefs that guide all your decisions. Your pivotal life events become the landmarks on this map, the cities of triumph, the valleys of loss, the mountains of challenge you have scaled. The routes between them are the connections you draw, the journeys of cause and effect, of growth and realization that link one experience to the next. This is more than a diary, it is a spatial narrative of your own identity. Psychology offers a parallel in narrative therapy, where a person externalizes their life story to gain perspective and authorship over it. Creating a map does precisely this, allowing you to see your life not as a chaotic sequence, but as a traveled geography with patterns, connections, and forgotten pathways. An artist might map their creative influences, showing a river of inspiration flowing from a beloved mentor, branching into tributaries of different artistic movements, with dams representing creative blocks and reservoirs symbolizing periods of fertile output. Another person could map their career path, not as a simple timeline, but as a continent where each job is a city. The skills learned are the resources it produces, and the decision to change careers is a voyage across a wide sea into a new land. You could map your relationships, showing the strong bridges to family, the winding paths to old friends, and the sometimes treacherous straits of past conflicts. The very act of drawing, even just sketching with simple shapes and lines, forces a clarity that pure thought often lacks. It asks you to decide what is central and what is peripheral, what connections are direct highways and which are meandering back roads. So the question becomes deeply personal and unavoidable. If you were to draw a map of your own mind, your own history, what would be its most prominent features? Where are your thriving cities, and what lies in your own terra incognita, the blank spaces of fear, hope, or untapped potential? This practice is the ultimate reclamation of the atlas of memory. It returns the power of the map to the individual, not to navigate a physical world, but to chart the far more complex and meaningful geography of a life. The Vineland map arrived at Yale University in 1965, a bombshell wrapped in parchment. It depicted a startling landmass west of Greenland labeled Vineland, seemingly offering definitive proof that Norse explorers had charted North America long before Columbus. For a moment, the history books trembled. Here was a beautiful, seductive document that perfectly aligned with a romantic and heroic narrative of Viking pioneers beating Southern Europeans to the New World. The map felt true because we so deeply wanted its story to be true. Its power was not in its geography, but in the potent desires it fulfilled. A team of scientists would later subject the map to the most rigorous forensic analysis, and their findings shattered the beautiful illusion. The key evidence lay in the ink. A research team led by Dr. Walter McCrone discovered microscopic crystals of anatase, a synthetic form of titanium dioxide, within the ink lines. This particular pigment was not commercially produced until the 1920s. The parchment itself, while genuinely old, had been stripped of an original medieval text to be reused, a common practice among forgers seeking a convincing canvas. The forger had been brilliantly clever, crafting a narrative that was historically plausible and emotionally resonant, then dressing it in the physical skin of the past. Why did so many experts initially overlook these red flags? The answer lies in the powerful human tendency to see what we expect to see. The map confirmed a burgeoning popular fascination with Viking sagas and a Western desire to complicate the traditional Columbus narrative. Its very existence felt like a poetic correction to history, and that emotional payoff blinded even seasoned scholars to the anachronisms hiding in plain sight. The institutions that authenticated the map, including a renowned British museum, were swayed by this compelling story, their authority lending the forgery an aura of legitimacy that took years to dismantle. The Vineland map stands as a permanent lesson in cartographic literacy. It warns us that the most dangerous maps are not those that are factually wrong, but those that tell us exactly what we wish to hear. This case forces a deeply personal question for our digital age. When we consult a map online, are we seeking an objective reality, or are we unconsciously drawn to the services that confirm our political beliefs, our consumer habits, and our preferred version of the world? The forger's real skill was not in drawing coastlines, but in understanding the human heart's yearning for a specific story. You can hear the city before you see it. A distant siren wails its own unique pitch. A specific transformer on the corner hums a constant low C, and the sudden quiet of a hidden courtyard tells you more about its purpose than any street sign. This is the territory of the sound map, a chart not of space but of sonic identity, and it reveals the eighth great lesson of the Atlas of Memory. Our cognitive understanding of place is not built by sight alone. It is a multi-sensory tapestry woven from sound, smell, and touch, creating rich mental atlases that guide us just as powerfully as any line on paper. The soundscape ecologist R. Murray Schafer gave us a vital word for this, the soundmark. Just as a landmark is a visually unique feature, a soundmark is a community sound that is unique to a place, possessing such quality that it makes the acoustic environment worth preserving. Think of the specific bells of a particular church tower, the foghorn of a local harbor, or even the distinct rumble of a specific subway line deep underground. These are not just noises, they are acoustic anchors in our mental geography. We can actively chart these sensory landscapes. A sound walk is a simple but profound practice where you walk through an area with the single goal of listening, mapping the sources and textures of the soundscape as you move. You could create an olfactory map of your neighborhood, plotting the journey from the smell of fresh bread at the bakery to the damp earth of the community garden, to the faint scent of chlorine from the public pool. Each smell becomes a data point on a chart of memory and association. For the visually impaired, tactile maps are not abstract concepts but essential tools, rendering the world into raised surfaces that can be read by touch, translating visual space into a tangible, navigable reality. The ultimate historical example of a functioning sound map was the network of bell towers in a medieval European city. Their peals did not just mark the hour. They organized the entire community, signaling the start of the market, calling people to prayer, and warning of fire or attack. The city was not just a collection of buildings you saw, it was a symphony of sounds you understood and obeyed. To navigate by this acoustic map was to know your place in the social and spiritual order of the day. So we must pause and ask a deeply personal question. What would a map of your own daily routine look like if you drew it based on sound or scent? Where are your personal sound marks, the acoustic signatures that define your home, your commute, your favorite corner of the world? This practice of multi-sensory mapping does more than just add another layer of data. It re-enchants our experience of place, restoring the depth and texture that the purely visual, abstract map so often strips away. It returns us to a world that is alive with lessons for all our senses, a world much closer to the rich, layered atlases of our ancestors. A room breathes at 55 degrees Fahrenheit and 30% humidity. This is the sanctuary for the Atlas of Memory, a climate-controlled vault where time itself is held in suspension. A curator wearing white cotton gloves gently unrolls a portolan chart on a velvet-lined table. The vellum crackles softly, a whisper from a 500-year-old hand, each delicate sound a reminder of the physical fragility of these paper and parchment time capsules. These collectors and archivists are more than librarians. They are the guardians of a tangible past, fighting a constant, quiet battle against the inevitable decay that threatens to silence these voices forever. The head of the David Rumsey Map Center has spoken of the profound responsibility they feel, a sense of stewardship for objects that are not just informational, but emotional and artistic treasures in their own right. The challenges they face are a science in themselves. Foxing, those reddish-brown spots that bloom like rust on old paper, is a fungal invasion that must be halted. Tears along a fold line, the result of a navigator repeatedly opening and closing his most precious possession, must be repaired with Japanese tissue and wheat starch paste, a painstaking process of reintegration. Even light is an enemy, its rays slowly bleaching the vibrant inks that once charted a new world. The ultimate modern tool is digitization, a way to give a map a new, immortal life in the digital realm. Yet this process raises a profound question of its own. Can a high-resolution scan ever truly capture the texture of handmade paper, the slight raised feel of iron gall ink, or the faint, musky scent of age and adventure? The scan gives us the information, but the physical object holds the aura. The stories behind these collections are often tales of obsessive passion. David Rumsey's personal collection, now a foundational academic resource, began with a single, captivating map that spiraled into a life's mission to preserve cartographic history for the public. A significant part of the archivist's work is provenance research, a form of historical detective work, tracing a map's ownership through auction records, library stamps, and handwritten marginal notes can uncover a breathtaking journey. It might reveal that a particular chart was once owned by a famous explorer, annotated by a king, or smuggled out of a war-torn region. A stunning example of this hidden history came with the recent conservation of an old portrait. When conservators carefully removed the painting from its frame, they discovered a completely unknown world map sketched in charcoal on the reverse of the canvas. The artist, perhaps short on materials or hiding his work, had used the back of a priceless geographical document as a simple backing board, inadvertently preserving a lost vision of the world for centuries. This hidden treasure reminds us that these maps are not just pictures, they are artifacts with layered biographies. So we must ask, in an age where every map seems available instantly on a screen, what is the irreplaceable value of the physical object? Why should we care about the delicate vellum, the frayed edge, the water stain from a long-forgotten storm? The answer lies in the simple, powerful truth that these custodians understand. The map is a tangible link, a direct physical connection to the human hands that drew it, the eyes that studied it, and the minds that conceived a world through its lines. Their dedication ensures that the Atlas of Memory remains not just a digital idea, but a living, breathing collection of artifacts we can still hold in our hands, ensuring its lessons are never just seen but felt. Every wall map of the Silk Road is a lie of omission, reducing a pulsating network of human connection to a single, static line. But in a classroom reviving the Atlas of Memory, that line erupts into a vibrant tapestry. Students are not just memorizing the route from Zion to Rome, they are drawing it. They chart the physical terrain, yes, but they also map the flow of silk and spices, the spread of Buddhism and Islam, and the devastating environmental pressures of the Taklamakan Desert. This is the 9th lesson, the pedagogical power of the map as an active lesson, a tool to build critical thinking and spatial reasoning by making the learner the cartographer. The educational philosopher Maria Montessori championed this with her concept of cosmic education, where geography was the foundational subject that connected everything, from geology and biology to human culture and history. The map was the ultimate synthesizing agent. The shift from passive consumption to active creation is everything. It begins with a mental map, a simple, powerful exercise where students draw their understanding of a place from memory before any formal teaching. The resulting sketch, with its exaggerated landmarks and curious omissions, is not graded for accuracy but celebrated as a snapshot of their current mental model, a baseline from which their learning journey will unfold. Historical maps become primary sources for lively debate. Why is Jerusalem at the center of this medieval chart? What political message is sent by enlarging Europe on this colonial map? Students learn to interrogate the cartographer's choices, understanding that every map argues a point of view. With modern technology, they can create layered digital maps, stacking a topographic base with data on population movement, climate shifts, or literary references, visualizing change over time in a dynamic, interactive narrative. The benefits are profound. Abstract concepts like cultural diffusion or economic systems become tangible and visible. The process engages kinesthetic learners through drawing, visual learners through symbols, and logical learners through data analysis. Most importantly, it reveals the fundamental subjectivity of all representations. A perfect illustration is mapping a character's journey through a novel. A student plotting the physical path of Huckleberry Finn down the Mississippi would also chart his emotional evolution, marking points of fear, friendship, and moral crisis along the riverbanks. The map becomes a deep literary analysis, a spatial biography. This practice forces a crucial question for our time. How can we redesign our educational tools to move beyond rote memorization and teach every child to be a critical cartographer of their own world, equipped to read the hidden lessons in every map they will ever encounter? A digital model of Rome shifts from the reign of Augustus to the chaotic sack of 410-6 with a simple voice command. This is not a video game, it is the emerging frontier of the cartographic lesson, a return to the atlas of memory powered by artificial intelligence and virtual reality. Tech pioneers like Jaron Lanier speak of virtual reality as a new language for sharing experience, and this language is now being used to rebuild the lost worlds we once only read about. Projects like Rome Reborn are the prototypes, allowing you to stand in the forum and witness the layers of history not as a flat diagram, but as a living, navigable space. The map is transforming from a static sheet into a dynamic, experiential learning environment. An AI-driven map would not offer a single route but respond to your curiosity. If you pause to look at the Colosseum, the system might generate a lesson on Roman engineering, a simulation of a gladiator's training regimen, or a visual overlay showing the flow of crowds on a festival day. The lesson adapts to the learner, resurrecting the personal, narrative quality of the explorer's annotated chart on a planetary scale. Augmented reality completes this cycle by bringing the past into your present. Pointing your phone at a vacant city lot could overlay the ghost of the Grand Theater that once stood there, or chart the path of a historical protest march through the modern streets. The ethical questions, however, are as profound as the possibilities. The data required to build these personalized worlds raises serious concerns about privacy. The algorithms that decide which historical events to highlight or which perspectives to include could encode new, invisible biases, creating seductive but deeply skewed digital realities. And the digital divide looms large, threatening to create a world where only some have access to these rich, immersive lessons, while others are left with flat, outdated tools. The digital humanities scholar Dr. Bethany Novisky asks a crucial question about such tools, urging us to consider not just what they can do, but what they should do. The promise is a return to the multi-layered, story-rich maps of old, but the peril is a new kind of cartographic control, more persuasive and immersive than any emperor ever dreamed. As we design these future atlases, we hold the power to create tools that expand our empathy and understanding, or ones that simply build higher walls around our own narrow points of view. A child's crayon drawing of their street places their own home twice as large as every other. This is not a mistake in scale, it is a perfect reflection of their world. Every map ever drawn, from that simple sketch to the most sophisticated satellite image, functions in exactly the same way. It is a mirror, reflecting not an objective reality, but the priorities, prejudices, and blind spots of its creator. This is the 10th and final lesson from the Atlas of Memory, a call to develop what scholars call cartographic literacy, the critical skill of reading the hidden arguments embedded in every cartographic choice. As the geographer Marc Monmonier starkly put it, not only is it easy to lie with maps, it is essential. Maps must distort reality to be useful, and that necessary distortion is where bias quietly enters. To become cartographically literate is to learn a simple but powerful framework of questions you can apply to any map. First, ask who made it and for what purpose. A map commissioned by a real estate developer will tell a very different story about a neighborhood than one created by a historical preservation society. Second, interrogate the projection. The familiar Mercator map, for all its navigational utility, dramatically inflates the size of landmasses like Europe and North America, shrinking the entire global South and perpetuating a distorted sense of global importance. Third, look at what is placed at the center. Why is Europe so often the central continent on world maps when the planet has no natural top or bottom? This centering is a profound political and cultural statement, not a geographical fact. Fourth, analyze the data being visualized and the color schemes used. A map of a city that highlights only tourist attractions and luxury shopping tells a story of commerce, silently erasing its residential communities and industrial zones. Your analysis should always include a search for silence. What is deliberately or unconsciously left off the map entirely? Look for hierarchy. What features are emphasized through size, bold labels, or vibrant color, and what is relegated to the background? And finally, scrutinize the nomenclature, the names on the map. Who had the power to name the mountains, the rivers, and the cities? And what does that naming tell you about conquest and cultural erasure? A powerful exercise is to compare a world map from a Chinese textbook with one from a European textbook. The Chinese map will often center the Pacific Ocean, positioning China prominently and reshaping the viewer's entire mental geography of global relationships. The European map, by contrast, reinforces our Atlantic-centric worldview. Neither is objectively true or false, but each serves a different narrative, teaching a different lesson about a nation's place in the world. This critical practice is the ultimate form of empowerment in a world that is constantly mapping us. When you can deconstruct a map, you see through its persuasive power. You recognize the real estate map that wants you to see potential, not displacement. You understand the political boundary map that seeks to legitimize a contested claim. You reclaim your agency, no longer a passive consumer of a presented reality, but an active, critical reader of the world's many stories. The final, enduring lesson of the Atlas of Memory is not about the past, but about your present and future. It is this mastery of cartographic critique, this ability to look at any representation of the world and ask whose truth it tells, that finally allows you to navigate the most complex terrain of all, the landscape of power and perception itself. A single fleck of gold leaf, carefully pressed onto a vellum map by a monk's steady hand, was more than mere decoration. It was a tiny fragment of divine light meant to illuminate the path to salvation. The creation of a masterpiece like the Catalan Atlas was not the work of a single cartographer, but a symphony of specialized artisans, each contributing their sacred craft to an object that was as much a work of art as it was a document of the world. The physical beauty of the map was its first and most powerful lesson, a testament to the devotion required to represent a creation believed to be the work of God. Before a single line could be drawn, the parchmenter began the arduous process. A calfskin would be soaked in lime, scraped clean of hair and flesh, then stretched on a frame to dry, creating the smooth, durable vellum that would carry the weight of the known world. This prepared surface was a blank slate of immense value, the very foundation of the entire endeavor. Next, the scribe would take over, using a sharp quill and iron gall ink, a potent mixture of oak galls and iron salts that would bite into the vellum, ensuring the lines would last for centuries. His task was one of extreme precision, inscribing the names of cities, the outlines of coasts, and the texts from scripture that gave the map its narrative depth. Then came the illuminator, the artist who would breathe life and wonder into the drawn forms. He worked from a palette of extraordinary materials, each with its own story. The most brilliant blue came from lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone mined in distant Afghanistan and transported along trade routes at great expense. It was ground into a fine powder and mixed with egg yolk or gum arabic to create the vibrant paint that colored the seas and the robes of kings. For the most sacred elements, he used gold leaf, hammered so thin that a breath could carry it. He would carefully apply a sticky adhesive called gesso, then lay the delicate sheet of gold upon it, burnishing it until it shone with an otherworldly luminescence. This was not merely to display wealth, but to represent the light of heaven itself, making Jerusalem or the Garden of Eden literally glow on the parchment. The artist Cennino Cennini, in his famous manual, The Craftsman's Handbook, detailed these very techniques, describing how an artist must first have a soul dedicated to his craft and a hand obedient to his mind. This human chain of creation, from the parchmenter to the binder who assembled the final folios, meant that every single map was a unique artifact, bearing the slight tremors of a human hand, the unique mix of a pigment, the personal flourish of an illuminator's brush. Can you feel the difference between that and a map printed by a machine? When we look at a digital map on a screen, we see pure, efficient information. But when we stand before the Catalan Atlas, we are witnessing a human soul reaching across the centuries, communicating not just where things are, but why they mattered. The gold has dimmed, the vellum has cracked, but the profound dedication remains, a permanent record of the belief that to map the world was to touch the face of the divine. This reverence for the crafted object forces a quiet question for our own era of instant, disposable images. In gaining the whole world of information at our fingertips, have we lost something essential in the surrender of the handmade, the unique, and the arduously beautiful? A city is a story you have been told, but psychogeography is the art of writing your own. Picture a group of urban explorers setting out on a derive, a deliberate drift through the city's veins. They abandon their phones and street maps, allowing the pull of a curious alleyway or the mood of a forgotten square to guide their feet. This is not a journey from point A to point B. It is an investigation into the invisible forces that shape our behavior, a modern method for creating a map of lessons written in emotion and asphalt. The Situationists, led by the radical thinker Guy Debord, pioneered this practice in the 1950s, rejecting the utilitarian grid of modern life in favor of a playful, subversive engagement with the city. Their goal was to break the predictable rhythms imposed by urban planners and advertisers, to hijack the familiar script of the streets. They practiced détournement, the artistic hijacking of existing elements, turning a boring boulevard into a site of potential revolution by simply experiencing it in a new, unexpected way. To create your own psychogeographic map, you begin not with streets, but with your own attractions and repulsions. You trace a route based on where you feel drawn or unsettled, noting the areas of tension, the pockets of unexpected beauty, the zones of soul-crushing boredom. You might map the desire paths, those unofficial trails worn into the grass by countless feet taking the most logical human route, a silent rebellion against the architect's rigid design. Your map becomes an emotional cartography where you assign colors to represent the feelings evoked by different places, a deep red for a street that pulses with anxiety, a soft blue for a courtyard that offers a moment of peace. Debord's own naked city map of Paris is the ultimate example. It was not a coherent guide to the city, but a collection of cut-up fragments, connected by red arrows that suggested new, more authentic journeys, breaking the city free from its commercial and functional chains. This approach forces a powerful question. What hidden lessons about power, commerce, and community are we missing as we rush from one GPS pin to another? Psychogeography revives the atlas of memory for the modern walker, transforming the map from a tool of direction into a deeply personal, critical, and transformative practice. It teaches us that the most profound urban lessons are not found on the main road, but in the quiet, unplanned spaces in between. The Aral Sea is vanishing from the map. Its shoreline, captured in a time-lapse of satellite images, crawls inward year after year, leaving behind a ghostly white crust of salt and pesticide on the dry seabed. This is not a simple change of geography. It is a stark, silent lesson in cause and effect, a direct cartographic indictment of unsustainable water management. This is the ecological atlas, where maps become powerful narratives of our relationship with the living planet, visualizing not just places, but the profound consequences of our actions upon them. The naturalist Alexander von Humboldt was a pioneer of this idea in the 19th century, creating intricate diagrams that showed how climate, vegetation, and geography were all interconnected across continents. He understood that a map could teach the fundamental lesson of ecology, that you cannot touch one part of the natural world without affecting all the others. We can see this interconnectedness in a watershed map, which traces the path of every drop of rain from a mountain ridge to the ocean. Such a map tells a story of life, showing how a pollutant spilled in a distant forest can flow into a river, poisoning a downstream city's water supply and the estuary where it meets the sea. It makes an abstract connection terrifyingly concrete. Similarly, a species distribution map charts the shifting territory of life itself. It can tell a story of migration, showing the northward creep of a bird's range as temperatures rise, or a story of extinction, shrinking a tiger's habitat into a few isolated, vulnerable pockets. A carbon footprint map overlays the world with the glowing heat of our consumption, telling a story of pollution that links the exhaust from a single highway to the melting of a polar ice cap thousands of miles away. But perhaps the most compelling lessons come from time series maps, those animated sequences that make change visible across decades. The relentless retreat of a glacier, the sprawling advance of a desert, the slow green fade of a rainforest. These are stories told in the silent language of loss and transformation. The most successful example of this cartographic lesson in modern history was the series of maps that revealed the ozone hole over Antarctica. The shocking, growing purple void on those satellite images was incontrovertible visual evidence. It was a map that needed no legend, a lesson so clear it galvanized the world into action, leading to the Montreal Protocol and the slow healing of our planet's protective layer. These ecological maps force a deeply personal and urgent reflection. What is the most pressing environmental lesson that a map has ever taught you? And how did that visual story change your understanding of your own place within the global ecosystem? Using maps to read these vital signs of the Earth is perhaps the most crucial application of the Atlas of Memory in our modern age, transforming abstract data into a compelling call for stewardship that we can all see and understand. A map of the internet does not show continents but constellations of collective attention. We stand at the precipice of a new cartographic frontier where the territories we seek to chart are not made of land but of data, thought, and probability itself. This is the realm of the quantum map, a speculative leap that asks if we can apply the ancient principles of the atlas to the invisible, non-physical systems that increasingly define our reality. The fundamental challenge is representing domains that have no stable geography, where distance is measured in clicks and landmarks are viral ideas or major server hubs. Digital humanities scholars like Dr. Martin Dodge pioneer this work, creating visualizations of the World Wide Web's topology. In these maps, a site like a global social media platform becomes a radiant city, with thick highways of hyperlinks representing heavy traffic and weaker connections fading into faint country lanes. Distance here is not physical but relational, measured in the number of clicks required to travel from one node to another. This is a cartography of influence and association. But can we go further into the realm of theoretical physics? Imagine attempting to chart a quantum probability field. A traditional map shows a mountain as a fixed shape, but a quantum map of a single particle would show its potential location as a shimmering, three-dimensional cloud. The particle is not here or there, but exists as a spectrum of possibility, and the map's lesson is one of fundamental uncertainty. This challenges the very core of spatial representation, forcing us to ask what a map even is when the territory is inherently unstable. The impulse extends to the most complex system of all, the human mind. Projects that attempt to map the neural pathways of thought or the sprawling connections of semantic meaning are modern-day memory palaces on a colossal scale. What would a map of a concept like justice look like? Its center might be a courthouse, but its borders would be fuzzy and contested, with roads leading to libraries of law, neighborhoods of social equity, and dark forests of bias. These are not maps to guide a physical journey, but to navigate the architecture of ideas themselves. They teach us about the structure of knowledge and the relationships between abstract principles. This intellectual exercise reveals that our drive to map is truly boundless. It is a fundamental method for making sense of complexity, whether that complexity is woven into the fabric of the planet or the patterns of our own consciousness. So we are left with the most expansive question of all. If the ultimate purpose of a map is to illuminate a complex system, granting us understanding where there was once only confusion, what is the single most complex system you would wish to see charted? Your own mind, the global economy, the very nature of time, the atlas of memory is evolving, and its next great lessons may be waiting in these uncharted, invisible worlds. Our journey began with a flat Babylonian disk and ends with a glowing screen, but the lesson remains the same. A map is never just a tool for navigation. It is a profound statement about who we are. We have seen them function as moral compasses, guiding the soul toward salvation. We have witnessed their power as instruments of empire, carving up continents with a single stroke of a pen. We have walked through memory palaces and traced the personal diaries of explorers, understanding that every chart is also a story. The great shift toward scientific objectivity gave us unprecedented control over the physical world, but it often stripped the landscape of its stories, its monsters, and its soul, leaving us with a sterile grid. Yet the human impulse to create maps that teach is irrepressible. It resurges in our personal cartography, in our critical analysis of digital power, and in the immersive technologies rebuilding lost worlds. The final wisdom from the Atlas of Memory is this: every representation of space is a choice. It is a story crafted from a particular point of view, a lesson waiting for a curious mind to decode it. So the next time you open a map on your phone or glance at one on a wall, I urge you to ask a deeper question. Do not simply ask how you get from here to there. Instead, pause and wonder, what is this map truly trying to teach me? Share the most meaningful map you have ever encountered in the comments, and subscribe for more journeys into the hidden layers of our world. The most vital atlas is the one you have not yet drawn. After this journey through the maps of old, we arrive at the final, uncharted territory, your own life. This is an invitation to pick up the pen and become the cartographer of your personal world. The principles we have uncovered are not locked in the past, they are tools waiting for your hand. What are the true landmarks of your history, the events that stand like mountains on your horizon? What borders, both external and internal, have you courageously crossed? And most importantly, what fertile territories within you remain unexplored, the blank spaces on your own map filled with potential and quiet fear? This is not an abstract exercise. It is the embodiment of every lesson from the Atlas of Memory, applied to the only world you can truly claim to know. Begin with something tangible. Draw a map of your neighborhood purely from memory. Do not consult any device. Notice which places you enlarge, which paths you trace with certainty, and which entire blocks you unconsciously omit. Your choices will reveal the landscape of your daily life, showing you what your mind has deemed significant. Then take a larger view. Create a timeline of your life as if it were a grand journey on a parchment scroll. Mark the cities of your triumphs and the valleys of your losses. Chart the rivers of influence from people you have met and the storms that changed your course. Give these places names only you understand. This living document you compose is the most important atlas you will ever own. It charts your growth, solidifies your values, and defines your unique place in the vast tapestry of human memory. It transforms you from a passenger into the navigator of your own existence. This is not the end of our journey together, but the true beginning of yours. Go forth,